With the passing of Wicomico County Executive Bob Culver, the direction of the county will be in the hands of another. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. Bob Culver was only the second county executive of Wicomico, and with his passing, the county's search for a successor will begin in earnest. But there's no obvious successor, and whoever it is must be the same party as he, that is, a Republican. And the county council has 45 days to appoint a successor, making that deadline September 9th. And that person will serve until the 2022 election. All of this comes as, of course, the region has been hit this week with tornadoes and high winds. And on the phone to assess where the county is going, we have Greg Bassett. He is the editor and general manager of the Salisbury Independent. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Don.
By the way, did you survive the weather? What was the outcome there?
I was lucky, and I actually got to go out in the middle of it. I had a friend who needed to have eye surgery, so I had to go to Princess Anne to pick them up at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I was out driving right in the middle of it. It was very exciting.
So let's turn to the incident which I understand took place, which is the finance director of Wicomico County, Michelle Ennis. She has left the county, her position. What's the background on that?
Well, she's the former human resources director for the county who was promoted by Bob Culver to become the finance director. And the county council never approved her as a department head under their rules in the charter in terms of they're allowed to verify someone who's, affirm someone who's been appointed. So her position in that job was certainly complicated and controversial from the beginning. But now that Mr. Culver has passed and Mr. John Pasota is in charge as both the acting county executive and the county administrator, director of administration, apparently he was able to persuade Ms. Ennis to leave, or there was some sort of action in which she left the building yesterday.
So describe for me some of the controversy surrounding her.
I think she was kind of a polarizing figure. There was an incident earlier in her tenure where the county executive had given her a raise, and it was only discovered through an audit, so that made some council members perturbed. But mostly, it was just a situation where they did not, for whatever reason, and they don't talk about personnel stuff because it opens them to some serious court situations, but they just did not have confidence in her, and they did not want her to be the finance director. So they never approved her. In fact, they even went to the extent of voting to not approve her, even though her name had not been submitted.
By the way, finally, do you get some sense about why the county folks on the county council, I think almost unanimously, said no to her?
That I don't know. I mean, I hear gossip type stuff, but there was some sort of situation where they didn't feel like that she was the legitimate person, and I know that they definitely, in terms of process, felt like they hadn't been involved like they were supposed to be under the charter.
So let's turn to Bob Culver and his passing. What do you think, by the way, first of all, Bob Culver's legacy is going to be?
That's interesting. I think Bob took a big picture approach to things. He was certainly hands-on. We had a situation with the first county executive really relied on his administration to do things, and he seemed more of a figurehead. I mean, he would get in there and he would make hard decisions, but Bob was at his desk all the time, every day, making lots and lots of decisions. And he worked very closely with Wayne Strasburg, the director of administration, and they did a lot of things. I think his success on this most recent thing, the Field 7.5, the field for disabled youth at the Henry Parker Complex, will be a legacy. He wanted to develop Pirates Wharf down near Whitehaven as a camp area, as a recreational area. Getting alcohol into the Civic Center, that was a third rail issue in Wicomico politics for a long time. No one was willing to step up and force the alcohol issue into the Civic Center. He did that successfully. And he was actually able to build quite a good reserve fund and a rainy day fund for the county. They were very focused in terms of their spending. He was not eager to spend on anything. He fought spending a lot and then ultimately gave in on some things like the West Salisbury School, the third phase of the James M. Bennett expansion, things that he tried to oppose when he first came in, but he ended up giving in on it, and those things progressed. So I think he's got a pretty good legacy. He was certainly, I don't want to say he was petty, but yeah, he was kind of petty on some things in terms of using his power as the executive. He wanted people to come to him and ask him for things as opposed to go to them and work some sort of an arrangement or a bargain. He really wanted to be the guy in charge. He saw that as his job, and he protected that very mightily.
Do you think he's changed the nature of the county executive position?
I still think it's one of those jobs that you can do whatever you want to do with it. You can ride around in the county car and cut ribbons, or you can really get in there and do the hard work. I think that will be the option for whoever takes this job next. Both executives sort of did it in a different way. Certainly Rick Pollitt was very affable and very political. Bob was very political in another sense. So the charter really doesn't say exactly how the person should conduct themselves. It just says what they're responsible for, and it's really up to them how to do it.
So what's the process now going forward in terms of selecting a new county executive?
Well, as you said, the county council is taking applications for this, which is kind of bizarre. I didn't think they would do an application process. I thought they would just sort of huddle in secret and make a decision. But they're taking applications through August 11th. Which is Tuesday, which ironically is also the same day that Mr. Culver will have a memorial service at the Civic Center in Salisbury at 1 o'clock. And then I guess they'll get down to the hard work of going through the applicants and deciding who they're going to pick. As you said, it has to be someone who is Republican. They have until September 9th to make the decision. And that person will be the county executive until the 2022 election. So it would fill the rest of the term for Mr. Culver. Lots of intrigue in terms of what they do. It will be a Republican, obviously, but do the Republicans have a 4-3 majority on the council. Do the Democrats want to appoint perhaps just a placeholder, someone who won't run for re-election in 2022, or someone who would be weak in an election situation? Do they want to appoint the weakest person in terms of just for politics? Do the Republicans want to appoint someone who will be very aggressive and be able to run for re-election? But do they also want to appoint someone who, like Mr. Culver, didn't really want to work and play with them? Do they want to appoint someone that will be more susceptible to their demands, someone who's more like them, who will understand, who will want to work and play with them? So there's a lot of intrigue that will happen here in the next 2 weeks.
So turning to some potential successors, the name certainly that came to my mind first, of course, was John Cannon. He's the council vice president, was president for a while of the council, has some rental interests, management interests in terms of the city and the county. What's the prospect for him?
I would think it would be pretty good. Now, here's the situation. Now he's got his colleagues there that he works with on the council. And he was, until this year, he was president of the county council. Now he is the vice president. He stepped down from the president's role, he said, because he needed to focus more on his business. His business needed more of his time. So for him to put the business aside and become the county executive, I think would be difficult. It would require a big change in his lifestyle, in his professional and personal lifestyle. But at the same time, he's had to talk hard to these people as their leader. He's had to try to whip them, to vote in certain ways. He's had to administer them. So are they feeling all warm and fuzzy for John? Do they want him to be the county executive, or are there past problems there that they don't want to reward him for? So that could be an awkward situation in terms of him getting it, in terms of him getting selected. Now, you could argue he only needs 3 votes because he can vote for himself. And I pursued this legally, that the charter says clearly that a county council member can vote on any issue that is before the county council. It doesn't matter what it is. Now, would he recuse himself because he's voting for himself? Now, they don't do that when they appoint the leadership. You can vote for yourself for council president or council vice president. So there's no reason to think that he would have to recuse himself. So unlike anyone else, in theory, he only needs 3 council votes.
If he were to become, by the way, county executive, how would you compare them then in terms of style, in terms of the sense of the position with, say, somebody like Culver?
John is a very exacting person, and he is a businessman, and he asks lots of really detailed questions in these council meetings, especially on issues of the budget. So he knows how to run a business. He knows, what a P&L looks like and what it should look like. So he knows those processes, and I think he would be very involved. I almost worry that John would want to be too involved in everything because he is so exacting. He might not be able to take, a 30,000 foot view on things. He'll want to really get in there and do the hard work.
Well, turn to Delegate Carl Anderton. He's obviously a former mayor from Delmar. What do we know about him, and what are the prospects if he particularly leaving his job in Annapolis?
Well, the thing with Carl that's really interesting right now is Carl, just in the last few days, has made it clear that he really, really wants the job. You know, where Cannon has kind of been coy about it, hasn't exactly said what he wants to do yet, either officially or unofficially. He's still sort of mulling it. Carl's out there gathering support. I have a letter to the editor in my paper today from a downtown real estate developer contractor who says that the council should select Mr. Anderton, and he is meeting with members of the business community. He's trying to line up people who support him. He's already told me he's going to make an announcement probably over the weekend that he wants to do this thing. So he's the only person out there who's really seeking the job. I know he toyed with running against Bob Culver in the primary a year and a half ago and decided not to because he would have to give up his House of Delegates seat. But it seems to me that Carl Anderton is going full gun for this.
Also, there's Matt Holloway, also a member of the council, 2 terms, fifth-generation farmer. Lots of business interests, particularly when it comes to the agriculture business and the farming community. He's seen as a link to them. What about them?
Yeah, Matt's another guy who had been on the council for several years and stepped away because he wanted to focus on his business. He started a greenhouse business growing vegetables, high-quality vegetables indoors. He's got quite the network there out where he lives near Hebron, a huge farm, a huge sod farm. So he's been focused on business. And I think while a lot of people would like to see him be the county executive, and maybe someday he will be, he's still pretty young. I think he's like 42, 43. There will be a time perhaps for him. I think he's focused on business now. But from what I'm hearing, he might have his sights set on Addie Eckert's state Senate seat. He might want to be someone in the legislature. That's a job that wouldn't be as time intensive and might suit what he wants to do ultimately.
I also understand that he did work closely with Rick Pott, who was a Democrat, the first county executive.
He did. He crossed party lines. And there was a lot of, certainly the Republican Central Committee and some of the Republicans were unhappy that he embraced Rick. But his attitude was that, Rick was in charge and we need to work with him. You can't work around the guy who's in charge. So he really did work closely with Rick. He was friendly with Rick, and that angered some Republicans. But I think it made him an effective councilman.
Well, the other name that popped out of me and your list was Sheriff Mike Lewis, who, apparently he's been promotable as before maybe the state Senate, county executive. Some people have, I guess, suggested governor. But it sounds like, to me, Lewis, when I see him, he's quite happy being sheriff.
He is. I think he really enjoys the job. It's certainly what is suited for him. He's done it for a long time now. So it might be time for him to do something different. But does he really want all the problems that the county executive has? Would he rather be in the legislature? Does he want to be an executive? Mike's got a good gig for him to do this. I think he'd have to sacrifice some things personally. So I don't really see him as someone who would do it. But certainly he's very electable. He'd be very powerful. I think he and Karen Lemon actually hold the record now in Wicomico County for getting the most votes over the years. So he is one of the top vote getters, and he would certainly be the top Republican vote getter in Wicomico County of all time.
Also, there's, of course, Council President Larry Dodd. What's his prospects? And he obviously has some strong ties to the Salisbury Fire Department.
Yeah, I think Larry's, Larry, it's one of those things of, if the vote splits between, Cannon and Anderton, maybe Larry's the guy. His colleagues voted him to be their president, so he's got a history of them approving him for something. He is in a retired position. He might want to be county executive. Whether he could get the 4 votes or 3 votes, because he would vote for himself, I'm not sure. But you have to put his name in it just because he is the head of the legislative branch of the Wicomico County government.
And Delegate Chris Adams.
Yeah, Adams again, Republican, a businessman, very focused on his business. I don't know that he would want it, but he's the kind of guy who might be, suited for the job. A lot of business experience. He's pretty right-wing, I guess you would say. He's very conservative in his viewpoint. I think he likes being in the General Assembly, but his General Assembly seat is hard. I mean, he represents the western part, the northern and western part of Wicomico, where Wicomico was divided up in reapportionment the last time. So he services constituents all the way out to St. Michael's, a very long way away. He's got a big district to prove himself in, and that's certainly time intensive. He's on the road a lot. So maybe he would like to be county executive.
And finally, this name Joe Ollinger, who actually lost to Rick Pott by about 912 votes, I guess it is. I remember matter of fact, I remember his candidacy. What about him? Does he have a shot at this? He obviously wants it.
Well, I think he would fall into that placeholder candidacy thing. Now, I think maybe the time has passed for him. He's a little bit older now. He's retired. I know he likes to travel a lot. He had a lot of great ideas when he ran before. He really looked at things in a constructive way. He had a little 2-year term on the school board in between, where he was vice president on the school board. He was another one of those people where he'd been very critical of the school board, and then he got on the school board and was less critical. Once you can look behind the tent and see what's going on, you realize why things are the way they are. So he sort of adapted that way. He's a very serious man, and I think he would do good in the job. Again, he would be one of those people who the Democrats might want because he would be a placeholder. He might not be the best candidate, or he might not even want to run for it in 2022. He might just occupy the office until the next election. So he might be one of those compromised people that the Democrats pick, but again, he's got to raise his hand and put his name in, or be encouraged to do it. He would have to apply, and I don't know that Joe's going to do that.
If you were betting on at least the names that we've talked about so far, who do you think would be a front runner?
I think Carl Anderton right now, because he does want it. He is out there trying to get the job, and you can't ever undersell that. That's one thing I've learned in politics. The people who do get out there first and start meeting with people and start trying to gather support, they have the edge up on everyone. There was recently, I saw, actually it was a year ago, I saw one of our delegates at an event in a really off time, a weird time of the election of the year, and I was like, why in the world is she there right now? Why would she bother to go to this thing? And it came back to me, someone said, well, if you're going to run against her, you've got to go to all those events too. You've got to be just as dedicated. You have to show your complete commitment. And Carl right now is showing his complete commitment to this. He's willing to perhaps give up his seat. Now, he could just do it for the 2 years to still go back and run again for his delegate seat, not being the seated delegate. But at the same time, he's working it hard. And you have to think that counts for something right now.
Because he does sit on the House Appropriations Committee, which is fairly powerful.
Yes, and he's pretty bipartisan. He's gone up there and he's worked with Democrats, and that's been a criticism of him. He's very close to Jake Day, and he works in support of the mayor. And you've got the whole city-county breach out there, in the rural area where the people don't understand Salisbury or think it's too liberal. But he's worked closely with Jake Day. Now, Jake is a Democrat. There's nonpartisan voting in Salisbury, but we all know he's a Democrat. And Carl has been, a pretty moderate Republican. On some things he's pretty conservative, but on other things he's pretty moderate. But he's definitely willing to work with anybody.
Does ideology really play that strong a role, do you think, when it comes to local government? Because if you're in local government, one thing you got to do is make things work, no matter what. Governors, obviously, at the national level are now dealing with the coronavirus pandemic, and many Republicans and Democratic governors are trying to figure out doing the same things, trying to figure out what to do. Does that apply, do you think, in local politics?
Well, it's funny. On my PAC-14 show, I just had Phil Tillman on last week, and he was the longtime county council president here. Was on the county council for a long time, and I said, well, Phil, these guys, they don't really declare their party when they make votes. And he was like, he said, really? He goes, go back and look at how these people have voted. They vote 4-3 on a lot of things. The Democrats vote one way, and the Republicans vote one way. And I need to go look at that, and he might be right. But I think in terms of issues, if you're talking about the airport or building a school, there's a lot of consensus stuff. I don't think it really applies to party. But this is politics. This is going to set up, the ultimate leader from a political base, someone who's going to work with this governor and the next governor, in 2 years, work with legislators. So I think it's going to be a really political situation, and people are going to see this in terms of politics, who the next county executive is.
By the way, is Wicomico County essentially Republican? I mean, should one assume that whoever the Republican nominee is more than likely going to pick up the seat, say, in the next turnaround? I know that obviously Pott maybe have been the exception.
Right. There are more registered Democrats in the county than there are Republicans, but in terms of turnout, more Republicans turn out for elections. The last Democrat presidential contender to win in Wicomico County was Lyndon Johnson in 1964. So the county has always gone for Republicans on a broad scale. For a long time, the Democrats were in charge, but of course it was the Southern Democrat idea. And I know when I was growing up, you had to be a Democrat because Democrats controlled Annapolis, and if you wanted to be a game warden or a judge or have any kind of a state job, you had to be a Democrat. You had to be a loyal Democrat. So people who thought Republican were still registered Democrats. That's changed a lot, but I think a Republican always has an edge right now in this county. Now the city of Salisbury is a completely different thing. The city of Salisbury is very Democratic. So you have to kind of deal with the people in Salisbury and get your votes from the rural area.
Do you think that whoever it is that gets this position is going to chart a new direction, or do you think that there will be some extension from Culver's legacy?
I think it would be a new direction. I think it always is. I don't think any of these people are particularly loyal to Bob Culver. As I said, Anderton even thought about running against him. They're going to do their own thing because when you're the guy, when you're in charge, that's how it's going to be. I think Cannon and Anderton would do it very different ways. I think Anderton would do it big picture. I think Cannon would really get into the minutia. So I think their leadership styles would be different. I think Carl would try to work with the council, certainly. I think Cannon would, too, having come from the council. But then again, Bob Culver came from the council, and he never worked with the council.
I want to turn to something else. There's a landlord's suit against the city over the ordinance they have, amongst other things, preventing rental companies from increasing rents and charging late fees and trying to deal with the eviction issue as a result of the pandemic. What do we know about that at this point?
Well, it's a federal lawsuit, and right now it's landlords in Salisbury, Baltimore City, and I think Howard County. They are all suing over local rules that pertain to rentals. Now, Salisbury's rules are like Baltimore City's and the ones that were implemented by Howard County. We have a lot of landlords here. So of the 23 plaintiffs in the suit, 16 are companies that operate in Salisbury, and they handle about 800, 900 units in Salisbury. The largest is G&I, which you see downtown. They have 285 units. So what they are saying is the city overreached in terms of its regulations on rentals. Now, if you recall when the pandemic first hit, the governor, in his state of emergency, said that you could not evict anybody during this time. The city went further, and the mayor was very adamant on this, and he was very clear about it. His concern was that in the middle of a pandemic, he did not want people to become homeless because he was going to have to deal with these people. We're going to have to find some place to put them during a pandemic, and that was going to cause stress to the whole system. People would be thrown in situations where they could possibly spread the virus. I think everyone at that time, we all thought, by September, this thing is going to be over, or October, and it's clear now that it's not. And to the landlords, it's clear that it's not. But among the city's rules was that they could not raise rents during the period. There'd be a moratorium on increasing your rent fees. The landlords just see this as a complete constitutional breach of their ability to conduct business. They're supportive, I think, of the governor's emergency rules about, evictions and things like that. I think that they're okay with the repayment process. The city also has a situation where you would have a timeline to repay back rent that you weren't able to pay during the pandemic. But the landlords want these rules to only apply to people that are obviously affected by COVID, that their jobs or health is affected by COVID. And they want some kind of proof on that. So they have filed this suit. And I think what's going to happen, the bad thing for me as a reporter is once a suit is filed, no one talks because it's pending litigation. So I can't get landlords to talk to me. I can't get the city to talk to me anymore because it is a situation where anything they say could be held against them. I have talked to some landlords. I'm surprised, some landlords in Salisbury who are not names in the suit, but they are helping support it financially. They're helping to pay the legal bill. because they're concerned that the city has overreached. So that's the situation. I think there's going to be a negotiation thing. If you read the coverage on this, it seems like they're all going to get together and maybe there will be some concessions or maybe not, or maybe the pandemic goes away and we go to the next stage. But it certainly is kind of a stressful thing. The landlords are pretty unhappy. They were unhappy when this was being done. They felt like they were being ignored, kind of brushed aside. So, yeah, there's a lawsuit.
Did the landlords have the landlords offered some kind of solution outside of the lawsuit to the fact that this pandemic looks like it's going to be around for a long time, that you may have lots of people who are now renting who can't afford it? I think I remember, for instance, in Salisbury, I think it's something like 60 or 70% of the housing is rental, which has a tremendous impact then on the city.
Yeah, it's more than 70 now. This is a high rental area. It's funny, when you look at Salisbury, the demographics, I just saw a report the other day about used car sales in Maryland, and we're like number 2 behind Baltimore. More used cars are sold here in our area than any place, and we have a very high rental thing. Now, I used to think, rentals are bad, and everyone should want to own a house. But the new generation, it's really changed. They don't want to own a house. They don't want to deal with a lot of the homeowner things. They just want to pay the extra to have the flexibility to move and go places. So I think our country's changing in terms of rental. The American dream in terms of owning your own house is just kind of a pain in the butt to own a house these days. It's easier just to call someone to have things fixed than to have to do it yourself. So anyway, the culture is changing. Salisbury is certainly reflective of that. And it's kind of a battleground in terms of rentals. It's been far worse, of course, in city history. The landlords in the city work together better than ever, but the landlords clearly feel like the city's overstepped on this.
We've been talking with Greg Bassett. He is the editor and general manager of the Salisbury Independent, and we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us this morning.
Don, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. Thanks for listening. Okay.